Good afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I'd ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you. Could I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, then we are meeting this afternoon to discuss and hear from our people about the proposed, that have done the research to give us information so we can create a comparable budget. And so this afternoon, we will hear from Joe Huff, Tim Fearley, Clark Wyatt, and Tina Thorpe. And I believe Joe's already at the podium, and I will recognize him first. Thank you, Mr. Huff.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this opportunity to come speak with you today. As we know, each year, the Capital Outlay Budget Committee works very hard when we talk about many requests throughout the school system and the dollars that we're given. We have to really work hard to make sure that we're doing right by our schools and making sure we come up with a good budget to meet those needs. So I thank you for the opportunity, board members and Dr. Jackson. Here we are again. It's amazing. It seemed like this process comes around before we finish up one year. Here, you get right back into planning for it the very next year. I want to take just a minute to kind of describe, especially for our new board members who have not seen this process, to talk about how lengthy it is and how in-depth the committee goes to making decisions. I want to first of all talk about the makeup of the committee. And I'll just pause on this slide and you can look at it and you can see we have several folks from the central office with maintenance and facilities, to include technology as well as finance, to advise on the different items that are in the capital outlay, especially from what the dollar amounts are in that process. But probably the biggest hats off goes to our principal representatives, and you can see in the last part. Each year, we try to make sure that we have representation from all levels, to be elementary, intermediate, middle, and high school, and you can see that they are. We do have 6 districts, but we only have 4 on there. I will tell you that we do rotate in the years to follow. Any of the 2 that are not on there for this year, they will be on there the next year. We do that mainly because, if we get much more than 4, the committee gets too large, and that's just what was decided in years in the past. So we do make sure that we have a good rotation, that all districts within a 2-year time period are represented. All right, I'll go ahead and go to the next slide. This is the main one that I like to pause on, because when you really look at it, in a process that starts in October, that ultimately ends in May with where we are now. So almost right at a half a year from start to finish when this process goes into place. I will tell you, it starts off with identifying needs. We use a Google Doc that goes out to the principals in October, asking them to identify their needs of their school, likewise with the directors that are involved. Principals have a chance to, in the next month or 2, October and November, to identify those rank those needs and compile their request. And then by December, it is all submitted, and it goes through those directors as to the costing. At the far right, drop down 1 block, and that's where we need the expertise of Clark White, Tim Fearley, Tina Thorpe, Robert Frisbee, because they know those dollar amounts for those things that are being asked for. So they get all that together, and then it comes to the committee that meets in March, and they go through that process. It usually takes about 4 days to get the overall number requested down to what the commissioners are allotting for us. And then it finally makes its way to the point that we're here today, which is the recommendation of the budget, specifically as I'm talking about the capital outlay. And then, of course, in that month of May, and then following is the adoption and the budget approval. And then hopefully, once we get all that done and you've approved that, we start going to work in June, and we start getting some of those needs met. This next slide, I won't read it to you because I've pretty much have gone through those first 5 bullet items. I will just kind of take a minute to focus on in March when the committee meets, They take a funding round to really just go through every one of the items that are requested and just say, yes, this is logical, this is a good need, and see if there are any that need to be excluded from that. Then we get into the heart of it, and the next day we start making the hard cuts, and there's usually about 3 rounds, as you see there. We do have an appeals process in which there was only one appeal this year, and when you get when we go throughout this, if you have questions at certain times, I usually ask if you can wait till the very end, and we'll catch all your questions at the end. If you want to talk about the appeals and the one that came before us this year, we can certainly do that. And then we always allot additional days if needed. Typically, we always talk about the process. The majority, if we ever need to take a vote on anything, we try to always reach consensus among the group. And I will tell you that is usually the case, and we hardly ever have to take a vote. But if we do, there is a voting rule that is in place. All right, you're probably asking, outside of capital funds, what are the other sources of revenue? And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tina Thorpe for that.
With our whole committee to come up with our projects that are identified, to go into either a lottery application, or we go into Article 39, a long-range planning. And the Article 39 is also called the School Capital Fund Commission, and Miss Amanda Simpkins is on that as our representative from our board. And that has commissioners, and it has Asheville City on it as well. And we have a committee that manages the Article 39. We submit our projects, we go through this 4042. This is the Article 4042 request today that we're bringing to you. But we have gone through and identified which ones of these projects that need to be moved to Article 39 or need to be moved to lottery. So if you're looking at the book, you can see that notated in there if it says lottery or if it says A39, which means Article 39 long-range plan. So I just want to bring those to your attention. Recently, under lottery, we have received 2 new funds that the state has divided out. So we have a public school building capital fund, and we also have a public school building repair and renovation fund. That is the same process as doing a lottery application, submitting it through the board, and then we send it to the county commissioners. They have to approve it, and then we send it on to DPI for them to approve. So just keep in mind for lottery, it's very restricted as far as you cannot use it for school technology needs or modulars or central office items. So those are restricted. Article 39 is basically for the projects that are at least $100,000 per project per site, or it can be used to retire a debt service if that happens to be a case. So we very strategically look at all of the projects that come in this process and clearly help identify where they go. So the Article 4042 funds is the most flexible source of our capital funds, which allows us to do more with the funds. And so this is the list that we're asking for approval today when we move through those. Next slide. In the book that you have, we have these categorized by 2 ways. We used to have them 3 ways, and it became very cumbersome for the principals and because they get their school improvement team involved and their advisory boards involved with identifying the needs and requests at their school. So we have 2 categories, immediate needs, but then we're very careful and we tell them, please list your school requests in order first. S1 is your top priority, and then it goes from there. And then we have a future consideration. If they know something's coming up, but they don't necessarily need it funded this year, it can be put out to the future, then they put it on the future list. So we have a really good process of identifying needs at all the different locations of our 45 schools. Next.
Sorry.
That's okay. And this I'll go over really quickly. As I stated, the school requests are first by school, S1 is their top priority, and so on. Maintenance is a M, and it'd be M1 is their top priority for a particular school. Or maintenance also, along with facilities and technology, they have put together very, very in-depth list of different categories across the whole county, and some of these items are moved down to county-wide because we manage them better that way, and we can keep track of where we are as a whole district to know what is top priority for the county that we're, for our school system. So then we worked through all of those, and all of those are listed, and we gave you a little cheat sheet in the front that identifies what those categories are. So the 23-24 projected revenue, this is all based on the sales tax of the Article 40 and Article 42. The county gives us a projection. Please keep this in mind. This is a projection for the 23-24 year of $18.8 million. And depending on, it's been very hard to track spending trends since COVID, but we are seeing a downturn in sales tax revenue, and that's where we got to keep this in mind, that that is the projected amount. It may or may not come out exact as the year progresses from 23-24, but that's how we build our budget, and then we have room for contingency just in case that does not come out to be the exact number. So this year, we had $171 million worth of requests come through, and the last year we had 113 million. So our request, the total number of projects you'll see in a minute didn't really go up that much. The cost has gone up. We have more than tripled our cost on a lot of these projects, and hopefully, as the economy is turning, we are getting better bids and get some better pricing moving forward, and I'm very hopeful for that. All right, so this is we take all of the items that were approved in the book as far as our team, and I've put them into a pie chart to show you that this year there is a lot of focus on repair and renovation, in-kind replacement, because in the past we've been focusing on other areas, and when you do that, the repair and maintenance gets further and further behind. So we tried to really go through and identify the true needs of each category, and really that's how we come about. But this is where, through our team, that the fundings are allocated right now. And this is just a nice little chart that shows you over the years since 14-15 that the top one shows you the dollar amount of request versus the amount funded. So the lighter purple was the 171 million of request, and the dark purple in 23-24 was the 18.8, the 19 million that we had to actually allot to these projects. And then on the bottom, that's showing the number of requests. So as you can see, the number of requests went down, but the dollars went up. So the pricing of everything, it's costing more. That's what that's showing you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Clark to talk about our infrastructure.
Good afternoon. Like Tina was talking about, working on in-kind replacements is something dear to me because this is what keeps our buildings working. This is the infrastructure, the things you don't see, the sewer lines, the HVAC, the roofs, the boilers, the chillers, the water heaters. And this chart represents the size of Buncombe County schools. People really don't realize how many buildings we have, how many square feet we have, and how much it costs just to keep them operating at a good, keep the buildings temperatures correct for learning, keep the water flowing correctly and the sewer flowing correctly and the leaks from coming into the building through the roof. So what you see here are the different building components, infrastructure components of a building, the quantity we have, whether it's a square footage quantity, an actual number, and then the typical life expectancy of each one of those components. Then you will see the replacement cost for each one of those, and then how much we need to spend on an annual basis just to maintain what we currently have in our buildings. This is not to add anything new. This is to keep what we have going. So if you see, that's a big number. Ms. Thorpe talked a little earlier about our entire budget's a little over $18 million. Well, that number's almost $18 million. So that kind of puts things into perspective. Then we go to the next slide. We will see, here are some of the specific examples. If you go through the book and put all the roofing needs together. So basically what we're saying right here, there's $1 million, a little over $1 million worth of roofs that need to be replaced that we did not fund in this process. There was not enough money for it. Electrical, a little over $1.2 million. And then if a total big picture number, over $6 million worth of immediate needs did not get funded just because there's not enough money. But, fortunately, we do have other funding sources that the team and the committee really thinks through it and prioritizes and uses all of our available funding to make sure that we spread the money as far as we can. So that concludes our presentation on the Capital Outlay Committee 4042, and would welcome any questions. A lot of times, some of you may have some specific questions about the book or about your district, so feel free to ask those, and I'll do my best to try to answer them.
Of course, I have a question.
Of course.
Of course. Clark, explain to me the Irwin Middle School need for the change in the car rider line. I've got a lot of energy and passion around school safety, and I was there this morning, and we were all backed up. I see there's $60,000 allotted. Can you explain to me what that is? And
So the amount that's budgeted out of this fund will be to hire an engineering firm to provide a design and go through all the processes to develop a new entrance road or a longer queuing line that will help alleviate traffic to all of the schools in the neighborhood. Currently, as you well know, it's not going to fix everything. I mean, you've got a lot of people coming to school right there every morning, but
four schools.
Yeah, one of the biggest concerns with Irwin Middle's drive is how it blocks the fire department and the emergency egress of that equipment. So that will be taken into account once we get a complete design. More than likely, the project will be funded out of a different budget source that has a larger capacity, because it will be a fairly expensive project.
Okay. So from a time frame standpoint, because I've got folks calling me about this.
In all reality,
A year?
2 years.
Oh.
2 years to completion, if everything goes well. And it's there's a lot of processes to step through, a lot of things to happen before that can happen. That's why this committee, graciously funded the money, because it does take so long to get through the permitting process, because the permitting is local permitting, state permitting, DOT permitting. There's a lot of state agencies and local agencies that get involved and have to approve these types of roads and driveways.
Okay. One last question about that project. I understand there was already a study done a few years ago. Is that correct?
So there was a very schematic in nature project done by there's a state group that provides this service, state of North Carolina, and they provide it a free of charge, very schematic, and that we will be using that schematic design with the engineering firm that we end up choosing to take it to the full design. This is more of a schematic nature, just kind of showing little cars, but we've got to get full design where all of our stormwater systems are and how it interacts with the complete surroundings.
Okay. All right. I'll try to be patient.
All right.
I'm not very patient, though. Okay. Thanks, Clark.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the board?
I have a question. One, just kind of like a simple formatting question, I guess, of how the pages are in this book. Like for the high schools, it seems like AC Reynolds, we've got a page and a half in the first sheet that's immediate needs, and there's a total at the bottom. And then the next page is future consideration, and then there's another immediate needs page behind it. I was just curious.
That's Reynolds Middle, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So they're in alphabetical order, and
That's
there's
what you got. You answered it.
Okay.
I did just get told I need to get glasses by an optometrist, and I refused to go get the +1s from Walmart that day. So that's what caught me. Thank
We'll
you.
get you a magnifying glass and lay it over there.
Yeah.
How's that?
I actually have one, Mr. Elliott, right
Yeah,
here
pass
in
them
my
down.
bag. Would you like it?
I'll just go ahead and admit that. The Reynolds High School driveway, or sorry, the Rocket Drive, as we call it. Can you just update us a little bit on the status of that? And I see it's not budgeted in this final capital outlay, I guess, request.
So
for budget, but-
our legal team is actively working on researching the ownership and the of Rocket Drive. We have all intentions, once that's solidified between all the interested parties, to begin, that's going to be another project that we're going to move forward on as quickly as funding allows, to do a similar situation that we have at our other high schools.
Got it. And so that would be, I guess, in this same 40-42 budget probably next year or some out year once those legal issues
It
get
depends.
resolved.
It kind of depends on how quickly we can get, we could possibly use some lottery funds to do some design work and, to meet the Article 39 process. I mean, it kind of depends on timing. But we, as soon as we get an answer back from our legal team, we'll start rolling with that process. But it's a best case scenario. If the money was sitting here today, you're still 2 years away from doing a whole lot.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks.
It's interesting how many hoops we have to jump through in order to do what we see we need to do, but to appropriately handle it all.
It's become a very complicated process.
Yeah, and I understand Buncombe County is particularly difficult.
I'll just smile.
Yeah. Okay, other comments or questions from the board? We appreciate all this work. Now,
Madam Chair, if I could just make one comment. I'm sorry. You know I'm a talker. I had the opportunity to attend one day of this meeting, and will tell you, first of all, I was overwhelmed, but, and I swore I wouldn't speak, and Joe held me to that. But this is a complicated process, and I commend these folks that were there, for being able to go through all of these and the knowledge that they already have. I was very, very impressed with our team. So I want to say thank you.
well, I appreciate
doing
that,
that.
Kim, because you are new
Yes.
to the board and to have this experience, but to know that we can call on one of these people,
Right.
whomever, and they can just, because they know.
They do.
They
And
can
I call them
talk and
all.
speak.
So, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And Ms. Plemons, I want to echo the remarks you just made because just like you and Mr. Elliott, I'm also new to this process. I've been through the process in other districts, but I noted a couple of things. When we think about 4.45 million square feet of roofing, 1.9 million square feet of carpet, 2.4 million square feet of resilient flooring, 1,800 exterior doors, 3,000 interior doors. That's incredible. Those are big numbers to hold in your head, and to have seen and witnessed the way that the team has the information organized, to see how hard they work so that when we approach our funders and we can show them a multi-year plan and a plan that involves our stakeholders, it's something that we can be proud of, and I can tell you that I've been extremely impressed by. I appreciate that the committee includes our local principals, and they rotate through, and we have to Ms. Katie Harris and Mr. Chip Cody, who are here with us today representing the committee and their colleagues. I appreciate their presence and their voice so that we do have folks who are living in these buildings every single day who are helping to make the decisions. And so I would like to add my compliments to the team and to the process. There's much to be proud of in our school system. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, moving right along, I believe the next person is Mr. Fearley. I enjoy all of these presentations, but I particularly enjoy Mr. Fearley's presentation because he tells us what our community looks like.
Well, thank you very much. I hope I'll do that, but that committee that works on the Article 39 or Article 4042 funds are more focused on short-term needs, but within that great process, really, our principals, our maintenance director, technology, and myself, we also try to identify needs that we know probably can't be met by the funding in that source of funding, but we pull out of that the longer-term needs, the higher cost needs, the trends that we're seeing. So it's a really valuable process, and the two funds really work together, one to identify shorter-term needs and one to identify longer-term needs. Because when we do find a need that requires a facility solution, 2 years is a short time frame. It can take a long time and a lot of money if you're needing to do an addition, significant renovations. We haven't built new school in a while, but it takes a long time. It's a big commitment. So we monitor the capacities and membership in schools to try to project out where we might have an issue in the future, because if we are going to choose a facility solution, then we need to get working on it pretty quickly. So I'm going to go through a number of slides here, but in the back of your book is an appendix that goes into a lot more detail. If you needed glasses on any of that other stuff, you're going to need a magnifying glass on some of my slides here.
Get it out.
I'm sorry. And the intention isn't to go through every line of this. It's to give you the ability to really look at this for the next month. And it's a good database for the future, because next month I'll be requesting that you accept this report. So if there are changes, things that come up that you look at during the next month, if you would contact the superintendent, and if there are some changes, if you find an error, I hope not, but if you do, please point that out, because in the following month's meeting, we'll be asking you to accept this so that the staff can then kind of carry out your wishes.
I don't know if we should hold questions to the end. I did have a quick question.
At any time.
So on the residential building permits, where it's talking about the Irwin District, it references Sandhill Venable Elementary, which confused me. So on this one, I think it's
So
going to
what
be your
page are you
next
on?
page. I don't know, it's not numbered. But this one.
Those are,
So
that
in the
is a
upper
map.
left in red, it says Irwin District.
Oh, it says
280.
Sandhill Venable?
But then it said 297 units, which are in the Sandhill Venable Elementary attendance area. So that, I was confused.
So this map basically is color-coded by the elementary attendance zones, and our attempt is to,
No, I get that. So upper left, read the paragraph that starts with Irwin District.
okay?
That's where I'm confused. I get the map.
Oh, yeah. That's not in our district. And totaling multifamily.
So should that have just been about the Inca District, or that's what I was confused about?
That may be, I'll have to find that particular one out. We dig into the county records and extract those And that may be a mistake. I appreciate it. I'm not sure. I'll clarify that and send that out. But surely Sand Hill is in Anka. But those are the attendance zones for all the elementaries. You see color-coded and the number of permits. We only monitor building permits from the previous year. So, it's cumulative. You'd have to look at last year's to see how many. Again, it takes a long time. If there's a big zoning approval, you're not going to see it in here because a lot of times zoning stuff doesn't happen for quite a long time. It stalls. Once it becomes a permit, we're more confident that something's going to happen. And the point of this is that we're going to project the memberships of each school. In a future slide, you'll see that, and I'm going to show you a little bit about how that's done. And there's some subjective numbers in there that have to be added. This is one of the things, if we see permits that are coming to fruition a couple of years ago, we may tweak our number of maybe how many kids might be coming into kindergarten. It's very difficult, I have to say, how this relates to exactly how many kids are going to be into a school, because there's school choice too. And we don't know what grade level. If someone buys a house here, builds a house, they may have a high school kid. So while this is important information, it's just kind of getting the pulse of things. And by looking at it over a couple of years, it gives you a feel where we're going. Permits did drop a bit this year from last year, follows the economy. But it also allows us, when we look at the capacity versus membership in schools, if we have a school that's kind of on a watch list, getting close, and there's a huge development right there, well, raises our level of concern. So that's really the point of this. There's additional information in the appendix about zoning permits and such, but this is just kind of taking the pulse of the building community here. And I'll check out that looks like a mistake. This next slide kind of gets in the weeds a little bit, but we do have some new board members. So I wanted to show you folks a little bit of how we do monitor and ultimately project the membership in schools. And membership is basically the number of kids in a school. So I'm using Fairview Elementary as an example. So you can see since 1997, we've been tracking the number of kids in each grade level. So you can see that at the top, K1 through 5. And it gives us a good historical perspective. And what you see highlighted in that left-hand column is tracking cohorts. So we use that term and regularly, but a cohort is basically the grade level in a school. And if you start in kindergarten, you're going to kind of track through that school all the way through together, if you will. And what this is showing is one of the schools, not all of them are like this, very few are, but Fairview is a good example of where a school somehow picks up kids every year. And ultimately, when they graduate, you can see their cohort is typically larger than where it started. So you can see highlighted in yellow, in 2013, there was 105 kids in kindergarten, but by the time they got through to 5th grade in 2018, there was 126 kids. So we kind of plug that in. That can happen in schools like onesies, twosies, but in Fairview, Estes, there's a few schools where we can see that that's a regular trend, and you can count on it pretty much. So we take that information and we develop what we call a cohort survival number. That is the percentage of that cohort that moves through those various grade levels. And so for this example, highlighted in the red, in 21, 22 on the right, 111%. Well, what that is looking at the 2021 and 2022 cohort. That kindergarten grew by 10 students, so it has 111.1% cohort survival. And this school, you can really count on it, and a few years ago, we did a pretty significant facilities solution. We moved a program out of this school so that we could use a classroom wing for additional regular classrooms. It took several years to make that happen, but Fairview was right on the edge of their capacity, and it's relieved that, but they're still growing. There's administrative solutions that are quicker, maybe not easier. So an example of an administrative solution would be to change those attendance lines. Well, politically, that may not be the greatest thing for you, but the board has had to do that in the past. We had to change the attendance area for Avery's Creek a few years ago because Avery's Creek was exploding. Well, that put more kids at Estes, and now we're seeing Estes is growing a whole lot, and we anticipate Avery's Creek because there's a lot of development happening around there. So there's a lot of factors that go into the projection, but this is the mathematical side. You can see we average the kindergarten side each year. We can kind of predict what that cohort might be in the next grade level based on the survival rate and how many kids were there the previous year. But how many kids are going to come in kindergarten? That's hard to tell. So in schools that have challenges in that regard, I'll talk to the principal and see how many kids have already signed up. And then, you know, say in Fairview, we have a little over 80. I think 84 kids are currently scheduled to be kindergartners next year. And the principal says, well, we usually get 20 to 30, 25 kids more will come after this period of time over the summer because we take whoever shows up at the door, right? They're going to be in there. So my prediction, and you can argue with me about it, under the bottom of that left side for next year, year one, is I'm saying there's going to be 101 kids. It's a guess. It's just a guess. It's an educated guess. And I'm going to keep that number, in this case, consistent. COVID has made this process very difficult, folks. So our projections, I think, are still in flux and maybe not as reliable as they were in previous years. But I would say that they're more reliable than just moving the kids in kindergarten to the next school, the next grade, and that next grade because of this. There are different cohort survival rates that are consistent and regular at each school. And we look at each school. Some have cohort survival rates that are well below 100. And we also see at different grade levels that there's a very different cohort survival rate. So that's getting into the weeds quite a bit, but I wanted to let you see that we're not just throwing numbers out there. We have a very good historical database, and we're making an educated guess. So this big fold-out chart here is unreadable on this, but hopefully in your book it is more legible. And I wanted to go through, help you to be able to read it because it has a lot of information, and it's kind of excuse me, the summary slide for all the membership versus capacity study that we do and monitor. So basically we list all schools on the left side there. You can see them within their districts. And the first column is their current ADM, average daily membership, that is extracted from the best one of two. Okay, what's that? Best one of two. That's what we've done since 1997, trying to use the same database so it's comparable. Best one of two is the number of kids in a school, the higher number of kids in a school in the first 2 months of school. It's what DPI uses. So if you had 100 kids, 1,000 kids in a school first month, and you had 1,010 the second month, the number we're using is that 1,010. Some schools have a higher number the first month and lower the second month. But it makes our comparisons across time more reliable and comparable. So there's three methods of, there's multiple methods, I should say, of kind of projecting how many kids will be there. And from a facilities perspective, that's all about capacity and such. From personnel and finance, it's about number of teachers and such. So there's different processes there. I'm really just looking at what are the impacts, and can I get a look ahead in the crystal ball of where we might have an issue and that we should kind of study it and be prepared to address it. So the cohort advancement is basically taking that kindergarten, that number of kids in kindergarten this year in every school, every grade level, and moving them ahead the next year. It doesn't take into account the cohort survival. So the next column is our column of next year's prediction of how many kids will be in each school. And that's important when you're really tight on capacity or you have concerns. And then we're showing 3 more years. I will say the next year is pretty reliable. 2 years out is somewhat reliable. 3 years out is a wild guess. But it helps us to try to get ahead of things. And then well, what's the capacity of a school? The capacity of a school can change from year to year without building or doing demolition on a school. It's not necessarily just about the size of the school, it's how we use the school. So we use the DPI standards for how many kids are recommended or the max limit of how many kids can be in a school, because K through 3 has very restrictive number of students that can be in each grade level. So we use that, we count the classrooms. But if we have a special needs classroom, for example, that has a much lower count of kids in there. So if suddenly a school has now 3 special needs classrooms, EC classrooms, that were regular classrooms, the capacity of the school drops. Okay? So it's how we use it. And that kind of leads to maybe some administrative solutions where we do have issues, like we did at Fairview, that put back a lot of capacity by moving numerous special needs classrooms to another site. And then we have the DPI capacity of a school. It's going to be different than what I'm calling functional capacity, because DPI uses a one-size-fits-all formula for the number of kids in a school and in a space. Functional capacity looks at how Buncombe County Schools uses that facility. So Buncombe County Schools, fortunately, has programs that are funded that aren't necessarily within the Common Core. So our position on functional capacity is if you and the county commissioners have funded a position or a program, it needs to be housed in bricks and mortar facility. DPI is, if it looks like a classroom, it's a classroom, okay? And apply the number of students based on the grade level. The third way of kind of triangulating capacity is the Common Core capacity. That truly is, here is the minimum program you can have as a school system in North Carolina, and that's all you're doing in that school. So again, if it looks like a classroom, we're not doing any of these extra programs. So that's going to be the maximum capacity we could get in there, but you'd have to cut out a lot of those special programs because things like English as a second language, the specials we call them, they're not necessarily required by the state of North Carolina, but we have very active programs in art and such. We're going to provide in our capacity calculations an appropriate space for them. Okay, so we kind of triangulate capacity. The functional capacity, the way Buncombe County Schools uses our buildings, is always going to be the lowest. And then DPI has some more flexibility. That's going to be a little higher capacity. And then the Common Core capacity is the maximum you can really get in there. So we don't count modular classrooms as in this calculation. We consider modulars as temporary. But that is a critical way that a lot of our schools accommodate membership that is pushing or beyond the capacity or accommodating those specials programs that we want to offer to enrich education. So that's kind of that middle column. We look at core capacity. That's the cafeteria and the media center. DPI has strict guidelines, or I wouldn't say strict guidelines because it's not required, but they have guidelines that say your cafeteria has to be this big if you have this many kids. If a cafeteria is undersized, we're all going to hear about it because kids have to start early. So it is really important. The media center, they have not really changed. DPI hasn't changed their kind of methodology for designing capacity of media centers. With the technology we have now, media centers kind of go out to the classroom now. So media centers have really changed. And if you'll see one at TC Robertson that is in the red, that would normally be a concern in 10 years ago, we're not going to hear any complaints because we have such good technology all throughout the school that the media center's use is not what it was previously. But cafeteria, yeah, that's hard on a school. Then we have a line for the number of modular classrooms. Remember, those are kind of coping mechanisms for bricks and mortar buildings. And then an important column to look at is the functional utilization rate. So it's simply a percentage of the membership to capacity. So if you're over 100%, and we're looking at functional capacity, you have more kids there than really the capacity of the school. How do you deal with that? Well, modulars is one way. You could put art on a cart. There's a lot of things. Our principals are very creative. But you can see that we do have a number of schools that are kind of beyond their utilization rate, that formula of capacity to membership. But you'll see in the next slide here that's basically the same. A lot of those schools in the red have a lot of modulars. That's how they deal with it, really. 90% functional utilization rate is seen as the industry standard for a very efficient school that still has enough room to accommodate that kid that comes in October. Especially in elementary schools, it's critical because they have very restrictive K through 3 class sizes. And if you're at 100% capacity and one kid shows up, you have to make a new class there, theoretically, a new teacher. And if you don't have the space, you're kind of in trouble. Or you have to bump up the 4th grade so that we can free up a classroom for that. So 90% capacity is ideal, it's efficient. We have a number of schools that are pretty low on that because as a school system, you'll see we have lost kids in the last 10 years. So I've circled some of the high number of modulars in there, and that if you're alarmed at that functional utilization rate, that's mostly how they're doing it. In the far left column, we've now color-coded all the schools, and I wanted to let you know what schools in yellow were kind of on the watch list. And what that means is there's some capacity issues or concerns there that have popped up very recently that we want to really check on and see if if they're a trend or if they're just a one-time thing. We have schools that we've done advanced planning studies. So we talked about in the previous presentation funding in the Article 4042 project to do design, basically. And an advanced planning study is when we've identified, we've got what we think is a problem, an issue. We will hire architectural team or an engineering team, and Clark and I, and technology as well, Robert, will work with them to study the problem and come up with a solution so that we can attack a dollar amount to it. So I've got a number of those in my office, and they're not in this book, but if any of you would like to see those, they have really detailed information about these schools. But we also have advanced planning studies done where it isn't a capacity issue. It might be an ADA or an egress, a building code issues, and we may need, because they're high dollar projects, and we will need to go to the School Capital Fund Commission, we want to have a pretty solid budget to go to them with confidence that this is an important project to us and this is how much it's going to cost. So that's kind of a summary slide there. And I'm going to go pretty quickly through the remainder because I do want to show you what our proposed School Capital Fund Commission long-range plan, Article 39 projects for next year that we'd like to request are. But here's a little more in-depth information. There's a lot of information like this back in the appendix that kind of slices and dices the capacity and membership issues. So this one shows the schools highlighted with the largest losses, transfers, or their membership has dropped, and schools with the largest gains. And you can see it broken down by grade level there. I'm not going to make any conclusions from that, but this is a real summary slide that shows what our ADM has done over the last 7 years. And you can see just before this, we were gaining, but we started slipping. We leveled off, and then COVID hit. And you can see where we are in the last couple of years. We've kind of leveled off again. But it's interesting to look at the statewide average for the ADM trends. It's almost identical to our trend. You can see there's ours. You can see the COVID drop and kind of a leveling. And if you took all the state schools and averaged them up and looked at their ADM, their trends are almost exactly the same. And we look, and again, in the back, there's a lot more information about this, but it's a summary slide that kind of shows the student transfers out of Buncombe County schools, where they're going to, and it compares last year and this year. And remember, this report is a snapshot from last fall. It's not today. This is best one of two. But this is primarily where students are transferring out of Buncombe County schools. And we have a number of transfers in, and you can see that in that appendix. And then what's really interesting about transfers is what grade levels typically get higher transfers. And during COVID, over to the left, that's kind of the end of COVID, it was a mishmash. It was all over. But the trend to the right, the current trend, is what we have been seeing for quite a few years. Transfers right around middle school and the beginning of high school. That's where most of the transfers occur. Very consistent. And then this next tab, and I'm not going to go into the appendix at all unless there's something particular you want to see, but this is, we take all this information from this kind of study and also from the Capital Outlay Committee, those projects that were kind of referred to the long-range plan. They're high-dollar projects. This is what we're recommending that we request from the School Capital Fund Commission, Article 39, in the fall. They typically ask, well, has the board seen this? Has the board approved this? That's why we're going to come back to you next month and get your acceptance of this so that we can report to the School Capital Fund Commission in the fall that, yes, the board has been involved in this. So we're going to take the next month. Feel free to ask questions. Please send them through the superintendent, and we'll address those questions. And if we need to tweak this and wait another month, it's not a problem. But based on your staff's analysis of needs, these are the projects that we see as being the top priority. And the total proposed high priority projects at the bottom, that will likely exceed, it will exceed the capability of the School Capital Fund Commission to fund. Theoretically, they go down our list as far as funding allows or as they see fit. If they don't want to utilize all their funding, it may be well short. In the past, what would you say, Tina, around 20 million they've funded? Yeah, and yeah, we are in there, right in there with Asheville City Schools. So this is divided into larger kind of construction projects, and then trying to take a bite out of almost all of those categories that Clark showed you in infrastructure, because if we don't at least take a bite out of those, we may not be able to meet all the needs there. We're going to get so far behind that those things will become emergencies, and they will also cost a lot more. So like Clark showed you paving, well, we can kick that down the road, right? Kick that can down the road a year or two. When you do that, now instead of just milling and paving, now you've got to go down 6 or 8 inches and take the sub base out, and the project doubles in cost. So we're trying to keep ahead of that by hitting something in each of these important categories. And I'm going to give Clark a pat on the back, because there's a lot of things like fire alarms and such that, you know, they just have a lifespan. They stop making parts. Well, Clark and his team, they'll identify a project, a fire alarm project, for example, where they can scavenge those parts. If we can do this, may not be our highest priority right now, but I can fix 3 or 4 other projects or have spare parts so that we don't have to shut down a school because our fire alarm system is out and we don't have parts for it. So he does a really good job of that, and it skews some of our prioritization because we need those parts. Things have built-in obsolescence now. They're made to last a certain time, and then they're not supported anymore, just like technology. You know, they just don't support it anymore.
Tim, can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
And if you said this, I apologize. Is this in priority order?
It's not.
Okay.
And I would ask that we have flexibility, because come August, you folks aren't here in August, things can happen. Boilers can go, roofs can blow up. There could be ADA issues that would that we'd want to reprioritize this. The things that probably would get cut off are more in the infrastructure category, I would say.
Okay.
But those are the projects. You can see that Irwin Middle that you were asking about, the queuing drive, that's in there. There's another critical project at Irwin Middle that we've been looking at for years, and it involves that building, that involves the cafeteria and some CTE and art and such. And we've done an advanced planning study, and it's, you know, it's a 1956 building, and it really hasn't been modified in that time, and it just doesn't meet current code.
Exactly.
So That's risen up through the years. We did an advanced planning study probably 8 years ago, and then we just updated it. And we really need, it's not only inside, it's outside.
Yeah.
Are there any of those in particular you'd like to talk about? Because I would like next month to, get your support on this so we can move forward and start to, making sure we got the right number so that when we go to School Capital Fund Commission, we're confident in our budget.
Well, when it's saying stadium lighting, is that at all the stadiums? That's
We have been progressing through the stadiums, and I'll have to ask Clark to address stadium lighting. It's not only the main high school stadium, right?
Correct. Well, we've been working to update our stadiums and fields to LED technology, and we will, do that through a phased process. We've been working where we've been replacing tracks first, and we have passed, we've got all those taken care of, and now we're moving into other fields and other stadiums. So that will continue until completed. We have quite a few more to go.
okay.
There's an operational cost associated with that. There's obsolescence, but there's also to allow community use. If it doesn't cost as much to operate, it's more likely that we can allow community use on our fields.
I had a question about the sewer line rehab at Inca High School. Is that an ongoing or a new?
Again, I'll defer to Clark. He's our expert.
Okay, Clark.
So the sewer line at Inca High School is a terracotta line that we are actively through phases. Either lining the existing sewer line with a product that basically creates a new sewer line without tearing all the ground up, or replacing it by traditional methods of digging it up and replacing it.
I had a quick question about, this is great information, first of all, thank you. But do you also consider like larger scale demographic projections in any of your future thoughts of like needs around specific school infrastructure? At the State School Board Association annual meeting, we heard a presentation from a demographer out of the Keenan School of Business, and he showed, made a big splash with everyone because he talked about large-scale demographic movements and projections going forward. Some counties were going to be dramatically losing population over the next 5 to 10 years. The age class distribution of that population is getting older, so it's like less folks and older folks. So maybe not as much pressure on public schools, but Buncombe County was, I think, one of the counties. It wasn't like bright red on the heat map of like, you're going to get, all these brand new young families moving into Buncombe County, but it was on there, of like one of the counties that was growing. And I was curious if you took into account those kind of larger scale, like demographic trends in how you think about things. And if so, do you see anything that's like interesting in the next 5 years or something that might deem we need to do something big on capital somewhere?
That's a very complicated question. So a county grows, but what if it's all retirees?
Right.
Those kind of things. So there's an interesting slide back in the appendix that shows births and deaths in Buncombe County. We have more deaths in Buncombe County than we do births, but we're growing. It tells you that people are coming in, right? Well, who are those people? It becomes then the question. Are they people with school-age kids? And if they are, that's why we look more at the building permits and such and look at the character of those. Because if it's a second or third home up on a mountain in Owen, how many kids are going to come out of there? Probably none.
Right.
But an affordable housing project, we're going to look at that and see what district it affects. So I would say yes, but you can't put too much. It's really hard to predict how those affects. But if we were in one of the counties that had, loss of that, that would certainly affect our projections. Buncombe County has typically, in good times and bad, had just a soft increase and steady, regardless of the economy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, in the Fairview area, like some folks, John Ager, for example, was part of the team that designed the new school back in the day, and he always likes to say that we underbuilt the school, right? Because it's one of the schools listed in your table there as like in the red category.
Yeah.
Cane Creek Middle School seems like it's almost the opposite, where the thought process was growth in population would increase the population of the school naturally, but
A lot of property
it's
out
actually
there, right?
it's actually like 56% on your
It's very
functional
low,
capacity.
yes.
And so, yeah, it does feel like that there is immigration into the county, but in certain pockets, it seems to be not young families move into that area. It's
So
older
on
folks that are
the
retired.
north side and northwest side, there's a lot of property that's affordable, buildable, and we're seeing a lot of permits coming there. And those are, we don't believe to be retirees. If you look at the character of what's being built there, those are for folks that will have kids that come to Buncombe County schools. That's why,
That map
a school may get onto the watch list. Weaverville Primary, very small school. We did a 2-classroom addition. It's really small. One family moves in, it puts the school, over the limit. So definitely on our watch list, but I believe they're a couple of years away until this stuff gets in place. Takes a long time for a facilities solution. So North Buncombe Middle as well could be affected by that. They have modulars, but maybe there's a solution. So they're kind of on our second priority here based on the, building permits. I would say we rely more on building permits than straight demographic
Yeah, that makes sense.
information.
I did have one question, since you brought up the modulars. When we're looking at the functional capacity, I just want to make sure I understand correctly, that is totally not taking into account the
Pretend the modulars
at
aren't
all.
even there.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's it. That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure.
So this is our second kind of list. These will probably rise up. We'll be monitoring these projects here. Again, in infrastructure, we're trying to take a bite out of a lot of important categories. And we do report this to the School Capital Fund Commissions so they can kind of see what's coming down the line. And we could certainly put $100 million of other projects on here, but these are kind of imminent, we see.
Okay, other questions or comments from board members? Dr. Jackson?
These are in the back of it, and I'm not going to go through each of these, a couple of those critical projects that we're requesting your approval to request funding are partially detailed back here that you can look at. These are these advanced planning studies. This is a big picture of SDs, but the focus here is the PEP program there. So you can look through those, and if you want more information, this is our transportation department that was built in the 60s that hasn't kept up with the times. You can see the advanced planning study there, and we have a number of others. If you want to look at them more closely, I'm glad to accommodate that. I have those reports in my office.
I did have one more question. I'm so sorry. On the membership projections versus capacity, the color coding, like where it's the ones that are color coded purple, school with advanced planning study for non-capacity issues. So will there be like so for example, AC Reynolds High, I'm assuming that would be like for the Rocket Drive
Yes.
project? Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Those types of things that aren't
Got it.
directly related to capacity.
okay. That's what I thought. I just want to make sure. Okay, thank you.
Queuing drives, as well as code issues that may be there that are complex.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure. Mr. Wyatt? You're next on my list. So I'll just check you off as your assignment's been done. All right. And Tina, you've done your part as well? Thank you. At this time, we're going to take a 10-minute break. It is All right, we're ready to continue on our agenda, and I'm not real sure. I guess it's time for Ms. Thorpe because she's at the podium. Thank you, Ms. Thorpe. We look forward to hearing from you.
Good afternoon once again. We're going to discuss the operational budget request proposal for the 23-24 school year. Within this presentation, you're going to see the 23-24 annual planning and budget development overview. We're going to talk about the current landscape, and we will talk through the budget recommendation for 23-24 that you all will choose and vote on later this afternoon. So let's talk about the budget cycle. Finance and the budget team is always in 3 fiscal years each year as we go through this budget cycle. You may or may not be aware, but the week of April 17th through the 20th, our external auditors were in the schools, and they randomly chose a third of our schools to be audited, and that went very well. They have verbally reported back and also sent feedback that those audits went very well, and they randomly choose those schools each year. Then last week, they came in for the preliminary audit and was here at central office, met with departments, school nutrition, exceptional children, all of the other areas that are needed, pulled all of their preliminary work that they will be working on between now and September, and they will be back in September to finalize our audit for the previous year, the 22-23 school year. So we will continue working on that up through December. We will get everything finalized and everything submitted to the LGC. So we worked through this current fiscal year through December. We began last October with the current upcoming 23-24 budget and planning. We are analyzing, looking at all the best one of two ADM that Tim talked about, looking at all of the expenditures, monitoring where we are with the current budget, doing budget amendments, looking what's happening at the state level. Then we also began preparing for the future. So we are constantly in 3 fiscal years working out the budgets and finalizing. As we've talked before, there are many budget challenges within the school system. North Carolina school boards cannot levy taxes, which would allow us to increase revenue, and we cannot do that. North Carolina school boards are not able to issue debt, so we cannot go in debt. Local budget often, almost 99% of the time, is adopted before a state passes the budget, and then hiring would take place before a state passes the budget. And the state often mandates additional expenses while not funding those expenses. And last year was a good example of the $15 per hour. It ended up leading us into not covering enough of our hourly assistants and those teacher assistants, those employees, which then we had to put more back into local to cover the remaining salaries for those. The other issue is the majority of state and federal funding is based on average daily membership of students. And you saw with the trend that I'm going to show you as well, it's the same as Tim's, what has happened to our average daily membership here in Buncombe County School for the school age, and then also what has happened here based on charter school numbers. And I will go over that. So basically what I just outlined is our timeline of each budget calendar. We start in October through January, identifying the upcoming needs, February, April, May, and then have to have it presented to the Board of Education by May 15th, and to the county by May 15th. So we follow and meet all those guidelines, and then we work with the county and work through the budget team to budget team, trying to get things aligned as to what we need covered. So these are the charts I was referring to, our enrollment trends. As you can see, mine goes back to 13-14. These are the best one of two numbers, and I'm hopeful that we are finally hitting a stable point around the 22,000 mark for our ADM. But the concerning thing is we have a new charter school opening in the fall. They have already reached out to me, and they are saying they already have like 40 applicants. So as charter schools increase, that takes away from the traditional public schools. And so as you can see, the funding that has happened that comes right off of the top for us that gets transferred to the charter schools has increased at the same rate that our ADM has gone down. Here is a pie chart that shows our revenue analysis of where we get our funds from. Mostly state covers 51%, local right now is 27%, and federal is 22%. Federal is elevated due to the fact that we are currently still receiving ESSER funds, and those, as I remind you, end September 30th of 24, and we have a presentation later about our ESSER funds, but we are approaching the end of those funds, and then this will drastically change the amount that comes from each category for revenue. And I want to remind you all that our operating budget basically covers human capital, our staffing, our employees. We have about 80% right now being covered through our funds, and only 20% covers the operations and overhead of keeping the facilities running. That is skewed a little bit. Buncombe County Schools has always ran around 85 to 90% human capital, and with the ESSER dollars, we have some ESSER non-personnel dollars right now that's skewing that a little bit and changes our percentages. And here's a different pie chart that looks at salaries and fringe benefits added together for the 80%. The contracted services, about 8%, commodities is about 9%, and then just a few little other things is 2%. And I need to remind everyone that Buncombe County Schools has currently, for 22-23, 742 full-time equivalents that are paid from local funds. So anytime a state puts out an increase, we do not just pay just the state-coded employees that. We pay based on all employees that amount, which then hits local. And every time state gives a raise, remember that all employees receive a local supplement here in Buncombe County, which is very appreciated, but that impacts our number as well from the budgeting standpoint. And as you can see, I've broken them out by the simplest categories that I can so that you see where those full-time equivalents fall. I just put an information sheet in there, North Carolina teacher pay by the numbers. And as you can see, the North Carolina average teacher pay for 22-23 is $57,805. And then the average North Carolina starting pay in 2021 was $37,127. And what I did was I broke out Buncombe County Schools for you. Our median classroom teacher salary is $71,885, and our average classroom teacher salary is $52,640. So I want to talk about the items that impact the salaries of teachers and certified staff. We have a 215-day calendar by law in North Carolina, and it equates to a 21.5 day per month and for 10 months for our certified staff that fall on that teacher scale. State and or local teacher bonuses are not included in the base pays, so those are extra. In the last few years, North Carolina has given lots of bonuses to certified staff. And then our ESSER money, we used several dollars, and we'll talk about that in a little bit in the presentation. We used several local dollars from ESSER federal funds to cover, it wasn't a bonus, it was a retention incentive. So all of that changes the salaries from a standpoint that's not included when you look at the base pays when you're looking at our state salary schedules. That is the base, and then local supplement and all these bonuses, and also what's not included, we have had lengthy summer schools through ESSER. Lots of employees have been working summer school. That also increases their salary that's not in the base. So I just want to keep that in mind as we're thinking about teacher salaries and certified staff. So in 22-23, the base pay was $37,000. From year 0 to 4, Buncombe County gives an 8.5% local supplement on top of that, which equates to an annual salary for 10 months is $40,145. If you divide that by 10 months and divide it by the 21 and a half days, divide that by, and we assume 8 hours a day, that's $23.34 an hour for your hourly pay as a beginning teacher. This does not include any additional pay for bonuses or summer school. So we're going to get into the meat of the recommendations. We have put together, the finance team with Dr. Jackson, we have put together 3 different options for you all to review and make a choice and vote on. So we're going to begin talking about option 1. This is the proposed salary and benefits for 23-24. Please keep in mind, we do not have any idea what the state is actually going to pass for a budget at this time. We don't know the Senate recommendations yet. We only have the House. And so the House is recommending that it includes a step increase and it includes a 4.25% increase for all employees. So we have built that in. Also, it includes a retirement matching rate of only 23.92%, but I don't feel comfortable with that because we are currently paying 24.5%, so we have built in a retirement rate of 25%. We also have used the House rate for the hospitalization healthcare increase. It will be $7,654 for every full-time, or for all employees that are eligible for the health insurance that we have to pay the matching on. Another item that we have included is increased athletic stipends, which equates to $400,000. And we have also included an increase to cover teacher substitute costs that we have seen, and that during this time period, we have had more absences and we have to cover those through local dollars. So we're asking for that increase. The final thing that we are asking for, which is really, really top priority for the finance team, is we want to get the salary study completed, phase 2 and 3, along with the shortfalls that I was mentioning earlier that came out of the state budget last year due to that $15 an hour minimum requirement. And then also our immutable cost of operations. Our insurance went up over 25% to cover our properties and our vehicles, our liability. Our electrical, our utilities, our water went up around 10% last year, average. And so we are asking to cover those $5.2 million. All of that leads to the $14.197 million that we're asking for the proposed increase to local salary and benefits for option 1. In addition to that, we are also asking for the upcoming, we've done a lot of research. Clark has called around and we've gotten emails confirming from electricity is a 10% increase that we're going to experience. Gas will be around a 15% increase. Water will be about a 7% increase. So that would equate to an increase of $460,000 needed to cover the utilities in 23-24. Also, the property insurance we've put out to bid. We have, it's not just property, there's insurance packages, but property is really going to be high. It's coming back in at an average of 25% increase. So that equates to $383,000 more dollars that we need. State does not cover any of these, so that's why we have to ask the county for it. Increased costs for contracts and supplies that we've seen. We talked about this in capital too. We're seeing all these prices, inflation. We cannot keep up with inflation right now. So we need $506,000 for contracts and supply increase. And finally, not finally, but the next item is the cybersecurity insurance that we have to have now. And I know you all have heard about the hacking and stuff that has happened and the ransomware that happened in a local school unit around us. We have got to switch to the Microsoft EES agreement with the A5 security enhancement, and that's $330,000 increase. And then charter school adjustments due to the almost, well, it's a little over 11% of everything we take in from local goes straight to the charter schools. So we would need 1.8 there. And then I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Jackson to speak about the request for the new positions.
Thank you, Ms. Thorpe. Good afternoon, members of the board. As we listen to the budget challenges and consider the need to potentially right-size our system based on a declining ADM, it may strike as odd that there's a request for new positions. This evening, I have the opportunity to share with the board, with our staff, and with our community what I've learned in my first 6 months in Buncombe County. I'm really excited about sharing all the great things that I've experienced, the strengths we've had. But as my teacher, Ms. Parham, who I'm looking forward to being here tonight, asked me on the phone last week, Robbie, she calls me, Robbie, are you going to tell it like it is? And I said, yes, ma'am, I will tell it like it is, because that's what you say to your teacher when she asks such a question. I will also share those opportunities that we have as a school system. And so one of the things that keeps me up at night is, and I don't know that there's a priority order of these because they're all so important, is the retention of our teachers and staff. Our quality is based on our teachers and staff, our faculty. And so certainly as you explore the 3 options that Ms. Thorpe will share with you, she's sharing option 1 here, and in a moment we'll go to option 2 and 3, that teacher retention piece, and I'll talk about authentically listening to voice a little bit later this evening, but the salary and benefits piece is one way to address that piece. The second thing that stands out as an opportunity for our school system is mental health support. We're seeing increased poor behavior choices. We're seeing increased referrals to our counselors and school social workers, our mental health therapists. And so as you look at these requests for new positions, the first bullet item is a request of $456,749 for 4 counselor positions to be utilized across the system as we've looked at the number of referrals to our counselors and therapists. The next 2 bullet items speak to a large increase we've had in ML, which is multilingual. In the old days, it was ELL, English Language Learners. There for a while, it was EL, English Learners, and originally it was ESL, English as Second Language. That population has grown tremendously this year, and I'll share the actual numbers in our meeting this evening, but getting close to 1,000 students who've been added across our school system. We have had a large influx of Ukrainian families, and we're very happy to have them here to be able to serve their families. Many of the children, however, cannot speak English, but the largest group of non-English speakers coming into our school system this year continue to be Hispanic. And so you'll see 7.5 ESL teachers and an ESL specialist to continue to help us serve that population. Multiple teachers have told me throughout my visits that when a student comes into their classroom who can't speak English, they've shared the challenge that our teachers face in that moment trying to serve all of our children, particularly when they can't speak English. The next bullet item, that 4th bullet item, the 3 cybersecurity technicians, Ms. Thorpe referenced the ransomware and the attacks that school systems and other entities have encountered. There's certainly been school systems that have been had to pay or demanded of millions of dollars to be able to get back to their data. And so we certainly want to make sure that never happens. And so as part of our cybersecurity insurance, having those 3 technicians helps us protect our confidential student and staff data and ensure that our systems continue to be protected. The next bullet item is a position that we've had a pseudo position in the past, Assistant Director of Transportation. As the board is aware, we are rolling out a smart bus solution for parents and staff members so that going into next school year, our parents will be able to pull up an app on their phone and be able to see where the bus is and what exact time the bus will be arriving at their school. It's also going to help us, as the board may be aware, our transportation dollars are based on an efficiency model. The more efficient you are, the more dollars they let you use. And so the more efficient we are, the more dollars we have access to. And so this Assistant Director of Transportation will not only be assisting in ensuring smooth operations in terms of maintaining our buses and our fleet, but also helping with all of that increased work in terms of making sure information, the GPS work, all of that is taken care of. And then the last bullet item is something that Dr. Baldwin actually talked to me before I arrived. I can tell you in our school system, we have as many assistant superintendents with more than twice the schools as I had in Carteret County. We have in our school system currently this year 13 schools that were designated as low performing. 22 of our schools out of 45 are being served by a principal who's new to their building. We have to be equipped to resource our administrators in our schools to ensure that we're able to assist those who are assisting our teachers. This particular position will be focused on educational equity and support services. So working directly with our student support services team, working directly with our administrators. As you're aware, we'll be rolling out a new code of student conduct. We're looking at disproportionality in all of our discipline data. We are working on social justice measures, restorative practices, and we need someone to help our principals lead this work. And so that last line item is for an individual who would help our principals and help our team make sure that we are properly and appropriately serving our students and properly and appropriately serving our schools, both in the academic areas in terms of low-performing schools working alongside Dr. Reed, and in the area of support services, particularly as that new Code of Student Conduct comes out. I'll just mention as an aside, and the Code of Student Conduct will come before the board at our June meeting, the Code of Student Conduct is built on the premise that for every consequence, there's a support, with the idea being that when a student makes a poor behavior choice, that we're supporting the student so they never make that behavior choice again. So it's not just consequences, but it's really what are we doing to help our children continue to grow and be successful. And so I just wanted to share, when we start talking about new positions, at the same time we're looking at so many budget challenges, why those positions appear before you on the superintendent's recommendation. Thank you. Ms. Thorpe?
Thank you, Dr. Jackson.
So to continue on, this option one had, I want to just refresh, it had the House budget, it had the completing phase 2 and 3 of the salary study, and it had 0 change to the local supplement for classified and certified staff. Option 2 has all of the items that were listed in option 1, with the exception that the local supplement increase would be 3.5% to all classified and certified staff. And that is a breakdown of the increase of dollars that it would take to have a 3.5% increase, and then obviously that changes all of the dollars with salaries. So our total request for option 2 would be the $26,701,772. But the only difference there is we're giving you an option for a 3.5% increase to local supplement. And the third option has all of the items from option 1, but the local supplement increase would be 7% to all classified and certified staff. And those are the dollars associated with the increase regarding those. And we would need to ask for $33,902,546 for the increase to the county. All right, so that's your 3 options. And then I have included, I want to show you this really quickly while you're looking at that before we go to questions. The county gave us additional funding it's called School Community Impact Funding. And I want to show some of the pictures and items that we have used this money for, and to thank the county once again for giving us this separate bucket of money. So with Irwin Middle School, the school counselor, Ms. Snyder, commented that this was a great enhancement to the school, and she's talking about, you can see technology installed the screen, and we've got close-ups of it and how well it works. And she said that it was especially helpful in conveying information to large groups of students in that auditorium. Very nice pictures there. Then at Estes, they had asked for security cameras, and we've got pictures of where we had placed all the security cameras there. But also, if you look on the middle screen, you can see how they can monitor those from inside the building and keep track of what's happening on the playground. So we added cameras there at Estes. Cane Creek, we also put in a pull-down screen in the area for them so that they could present and do similar presentations from that standpoint. Woodfin has a donor plus. We used community impact because they did not have a playground. So we are working very hard, as you can see, to get Woodfin their playground. We've had to go through a lot of hoops and permits, but it is coming right along. And so the county also helped contribute to this project. And then Hall Creek Elementary, we put in new playground equipment, and those are some handicap swings, which I have seen videos of the kids, and they are absolutely loving these. We also put some in, but not using community impact, at Black Mountain Elementary, and it's amazing to watch these kids enjoy those swings and the being able to join in. So that is, I just wanted to highlight some positive things that are going on with the community impact funds that came directly from the county commissioners.
Mm-hmm. And they are across the county.
Yes, we are spreading them out. So I do want to say thank you to that. Now, budget questions. Do you guys have any questions for me pertaining to the budget?
A couple of questions, and I guess really, Tina, they would be for you. So when we're talking about the teacher pay, sorry, let me get to, there are like so many slides. Okay, so for Buncombe County Schools, the medium classroom teacher salaries and the average classroom teacher salaries, is that with, does that include like master pay for the ones that have been rolled in and the,
we have yes, so we have a large,
boards,
let me
yes.
explain that. We have a large population across the nation. We're very high with the number of national board certified teachers that we have. And we also are very high in the number of staff members that have a master's, advanced degree, 6-year degree or more, and doctorates that are teaching in our classrooms. So yes, and that also includes the local supplement in there as well. So that is our true median.
okay.
And then that's our classroom average teacher salary.
Okay, so it does include all of those things then.
It does not include, it would include bonuses in that too, but it would not include summer school pay.
Right, okay. All right, and thank you for breaking that down for the beginning teacher salary.
So even though at the bottom on the left, it says working summer school, you're saying summer school salary is not being included in the median classroom teacher salary and average classroom teacher salary?
That's correct, because summer school is a contract and it's outside the 215-day calendar.
Okay.
And it is separate pay.
Okay, and same with any coaching supplements, et cetera, that none of that's being factored into this.
Coaches do. They get retirement and it goes into their pay.
So when we're looking at the median classroom salary of $71,885, it could be including someone that's, in theory, coaching 3 sports and getting 3
I can tell you that's
coaching
not,
supplements.
it does include that, but I can tell you, our high end is based on those and they also get held harmless, depending on the law. It's, the high end is they are very experienced,
Yeah,
15 years or more.
Yep.
Because the salary scales, 15 years or more, plus if they're 30 years or more here, they get 16% supplement on it. Then if they are a doctorate, that is about 13.5% more, and then if they're NIBITs, that's 12% more. So those are the ones that are in that very high bucket, is based on education and years of experience, not coaching sports, not.
okay. No, I was just wondering if that was being included, but,
But coaches does include in here because that is part of their salary that also gives them retirement benefits associated with it.
okay, thank you.
So my other question was with regards to the Assistant Director of Transportation. And I know we just talked about this, but we have somebody that's currently doing that work, correct? So this isn't like a whole brand-new position in that it's costing us an additional $119,000?
Well, I'll take a crack at that, Ms. Churchill, and then let Tina jump into it. So we had someone who was doing much of the work. However, when we have someone who's doing the work of a director, they should be paid as a director, and that funding has to come from local dollars as opposed to state dollars. So it's not a new position. It's just that we have to move it to local dollars from state dollars to recognize the work that's being done.
Okay.
You hit the nail on the head.
It's not that we're going to have two positions.
That's exactly right.
It's just that this is just to note that that money is being shifted over, which I hope also included an increase for that person who has been doing that kind of work for a while.
And unfortunately, that person is no longer with us, Ms. Churchill.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Are there other questions?
Yeah. Back to the classified staff. The phase 2 and phase 3, where does that put our hourly pay for those classified staff if that's fully implemented? Because right now, the state by state law that from last year, right, went to $15 an hour. So is there does that implementation of phase 2 and phase 3 together, how does it move that number?
I can tell you an average that's going to happen because remember, we go now, we used to be frozen from years 0 to 15 for hourly classified staff. They did not get a raise. And then there was also a compression that happened between the pay grades that we have worked to eliminate. So I can tell you that the first phase, let me give you the average for the total. There was an average, which I presented last board meeting, 17.42% average increase for phase 1, 2, and 3. So everybody, the average was 17.42 that they would experience for phase 1, 2, and 3. In phase 1, because we had to meet the $15 an hour minimum and the years 0 to 15, we worked really hard to get those straightened out. So the next two phases works on the remainder. And I can tell you that the first phase averaged 10% increase to everyone. So phase 2 and 3 is around the remaining average 7.42% more increase is what that includes.
Because that's the amount of money that the commissioners gave us to use to do that implementation. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is that, so and I'm sorry, I should have probably reviewed the details of phase 2 and 3 before right now, but that 7% roughly that you just mentioned, is that going to be applied to this? Because the $15 an hour is the floor, right? It's the new floor.
That
The new
is,
starting number.
let me explain that. I don't want this to be misrepresented. Pay grade 55, coming straight in, brand new employee off the street for year 0 is $15 an hour. with the House budget, it would give them 4.25% on that. And then we spread from there down, we also give them the 7.42 and the 4.25. It spreads through the steps, and it spreads through the pay scales to pay scale 86.
But not evenly, right? Just because I think what you're trying to figure out is like that bottom.
Yeah, it doesn't, it's not going to
that's what he's
change,
trying
because
to figure
it's not, it's not going to impact the actual pay scale, right? So if there's still, the implementation of phase 2 and 3 is still going to keep that $15 an hour as the entry-level position, like you said, off the street, will still start at $15 an hour.
That's the base, plus the
Base.
10.77% local supplement, or if the board and the county gives us 3.5 or 7%, plus the state gives us 4.25. That number's going to change.
Yeah. Okay.
Depends on which way you all vote, and it also depends on how much the state gives us. And because remember, these are percentages, and they are incremental. So those are the averages.
Okay, so I want to make sure I'm clear, because I think the way that I thought I think I'm confused, but maybe
Okay.
I'm not. Okay, so I feel like what I just heard you say, so let's use easy math just to make it easier. So let's say it was 10% that the state and the county gave us. So what you're saying is like now it's going to be $15 plus a supplement plus a 10% for that.
So if it were,
Like just on that $15, because I think that's what, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're trying to figure out the bottom number. So let's put a percent on it. We realize that we're not fortune tellers, but let's say it's 10%.
the lowest could be $15 plus the 4.25.
Okay,
if
and
you
that
go
would be
with-
if the state and the county did nothing. What if the state
would
and the
have to
county
do-
did 10?
Wait just a minute. So the lowest would be $15 an hour.
Yeah,
If the state gives 4.25,
yeah,
it would give the 4.25, and then you take that number and multiply it by the 10.77 that we currently are for local supplement if we don't change it. So 15 times the 4.25 times the 10.77. That will give you, if we don't change local supplement and the state gives 4.25, then they all shift.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that, and just the 10.77 is what's included in that phase 2 and 3. Okay, so there'll be by implementing phase 2 and 3, there's an additional 7%.
Phase 2, okay, so it's on top of phase 2 and 3.
Right. Yeah.
it's not.
So in phase 2 and 3, if you want to separate it, in phase 2 is about little over 3%. Phase 3 has a little over 3%, which gets you to that 7.42% that's built into phase 2 and 3.
Got it. That's
But the
what
phase 2 and the 3 really had more effect on the higher end of the,
It has effect on every one of them except pay grade 55, year 0. It has an impact on every one of them except the first one, pay grade 55, year 0.
but they're still seeing a
Yeah.
raise, just not from that.
So Tina, let me ask a question on, when you say pay grade 55, are we saying, I mean, is that all job families, like maintenance?
Oh, no. That's like an entry-level
What kind of job is that?
custodian.
Okay.
Not a head custodian, not a
Okay,
basic.
base
The
custodian.
first one coming in before they go to lead or head custodian.
Okay,
That's not teacher assistants, that's not, they come in at a higher pay grade than that.
okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Tina, I think it's important that we like clarify
Yes.
on the record, because there have been like, my brain's not working right now. I'm so sorry.
Rumors?
Not rumors. There's been discussion and there's been a petition. Sorry, that's the word I couldn't find. And some of what is being asked for, we can't even legally do. Like, because it bumps those numbers outside of the maximum threshold for different
Let me
pay grades.
explain that.
Can you explain that?
Yes, let me explain that. So we ran the analysis based on the petition, and it would be approximately a $42 million increase. And but that was using originally the 1960 plus the LSU would get you at $21.71 an hour. And then flowing through based on the 2% increases that they had stated based on the steps.
Yeah.
And so I want to be very clear about this. It immediately throws you out of the state ranges, and we have all of our custodians in the state bucket being paid because there's a financial impact on lots of areas of hourly if you don't pay them from the state buckets. The teacher assistants, 027. Those are worker comp issues that come in, and then local would have to pick up every bit of those as well. So to be in those state ranges is very, very important for hourly employees across the board. And that would throw us out of those ranges immediately. I've done the numbers, and I know where it, pay grade 55 on, it throws us out of those state ranges.
And so if we did do that and it were a position that was outside of that range, then that would have to be a locally funded position. So as a local entity, not only would be absorbing that added position, but we would also be absorbing the added cost of paying for workers' comp for that person, whereas if they're being funded by the state, we are
Correct.
not, as an entity, having to
that's-
absorb that cost.
yes.
So it's very fiscally responsible to do it the way that it's being done.
We have looked at this to be the most efficient, effective way, but yet appreciate our employees, give them the highest that we can possibly give them, and be within a living wage to be able to meet the demand of living in Buncombe County, if you live in Buncombe County. The majority of our staff do not live in Buncombe County, but we are very thankful for our staff and want that to be known. And we're very thankful for the county for what they have given us, because most other counties do not give the same amount, as I showed before. They don't give a local supplement to hourly or classified, and we are the sixth highest for certified staff as well on our local supplement. So I do want to make sure that's very clear.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
If I may, I do want to just mention that we want our employees to receive as much as they possibly can, which means that part of the responsibility I accept, and I know our board does, is to advocate for that. And the advocacy really mainly is at the state level, because the state can increase those ranges. The state can increase the salaries, that base salary. And when the employee is paid with the state dollars, then the workers' comp expense is paid by the state. And so I don't want the message to be we can or we don't or all those kind of things. We're simply saying from county dollars, we can't afford to go that route, but that doesn't mean we've given up, right? We want to continue to passionately advocate for every one of our employees at the state level. I had the opportunity to do some of that on Monday afternoon. I was at the General Assembly for that work. And so we are certainly hopeful that in the state budget that they'll recognize the value of our employees. And I know everyone here knows that, and everyone in the room knows that. But I do want to say that if local can't pick it up, that doesn't mean we say we can't do it. It means we need to passionately continue, and regardless of what local does, to passionately continue to advocate at the state level.
Thank you. Other questions?
I was just going to go back to the $15 per hour. And I know I was a 40-year banker, but I have to use a calculator. Was adding that up, and if we did a 7%, it looks like it would take that 15 out with the 4.5% or 4.25 from the state, 10.77 currently, and then add 7% to that.
Mm-hmm. That's option 3.
And that would be like $18.53 an hour. That's basically.
Yes, it's right at, yes, it is.
Okay.
It's over 18.
$17.92.
I thought that additional 7% is being, okay, hold on.
Take this number. I don't have my calculator.
Oh, no, I'm good. I see it.
Okay.
Yep, we're good.
It's over 18. You're correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure. And it would be close to 18 with the 3% or whatever. Mm-hmm. Yep.
That is
okay.
right.
Okay.
Okay, are we clear now?
I just, a couple other things around the coaching supplement.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of discussion around this too. That's a substantial, contribution to improving the status of our coaching supplement in the county. Do we know right now where our county stands in relation to other counties, or districts, districts in the state around coaching pay? Are we in like the bottom percent or quartile or something of in the state regarding coaching pay?
Unfortunately, I don't have that data, Mr. Elliott. I can tell you anecdotally, our coaches are saying that we are. I've met with them. I'm sure they've talked to you as well. But I've not seen that data, but we will find that data for you.
I have the salary schedules for coaches in my office. We can meet later for across the state.
Yeah, I'd like to have that information as well.
I can't discuss it now because I don't have it memorized or
Okay. No,
looked
that's
at.
okay.
But we do have that. David Ball and I collected it, and it is the most up-to-date from all the LEAs, what they're paying based on the type of coach they are. We have it.
I was just curious, order of magnitude, like this 400 and, I need those readers.
400,000.
400,000.
Yeah, the 400,000, does that increase our coaching supplement on average by 25%, 60%? I mean, what's,
So the way the formula was built, it gave them $300 plus 10% on it, on their current rate. That's how we built the schedules. David Ball and I worked together. We did straighten out a few schedules. There was some compression, there was some issues. We did the similar thing that we did with the classified schedules. We did adjust and make it more in alignment based on what they're coaching, and it is a $300 increase plus 10%.
okay.
That's what the
That's what this request
the
includes.
request is, okay. Yeah. Okay.
I just had one other question or / comment for Dr. Jackson. That budgets really are a function of showing your priorities in an organization. And so there's a lot in this budget proposal that is exciting, I think, to me, and I appreciate your approach on a lot of this, because it shows that you're 45 days in 45 schools, or 45 schools in 45 days. You really were looking and listening very closely to the needs of our schools. I think one thing that we've talked a lot about that you mentioned was the mental health needs of our students, mental health needs of our teachers in our schools, and that, of course, salary has a lot to do with sort of contentment around your profession and your job, but also working conditions and the quality of your job when you show up and what you have to deal with certainly plays a lot into that too. So I really appreciate this concept of additional counselors, ESL teachers, and ESL specialists. I think that those are very, very wise investments for us to make. I was just curious on the counselor piece. You mentioned that there's 4 to be utilized across the system. So does that mean that there's going to be 4 additional school counselors placed within priority schools across the system? Or does that mean that we're trying to move towards a system that's like those such as New Hanover, where they had a central office set of kind of mental health professionals that were able to support all schools from central office? Which model is it? Is it in the school or in central office?
The model that we've been approaching is in the school closest to our students. And so ideally, we'd like to get to the national recommendations for school counselors and for school social workers. And so we do have a district team that responds when there are great needs. They've responded multiple times this year, and so we still have that model, so perhaps it's a hybrid. But at this time, we're working towards increasing, or decreasing rather, the ratio of counselors to students and the counselors being in our buildings. However, that's still work to be done in terms of looking at the ratios across the district, also looking at our referral rate so that we equitably resource our schools based on the needs as they're demonstrated through the request for services. And so that's still work to be done, and a lot of that work will be based on where our budget winds up. You know, the budget process sometimes takes through November, but as we go into the summer and have a better idea of how many counselors we have, then we'll resource the counselors based on the referral rates and the needs of the schools.
And I know that, so counselors work very closely with social workers as a student services team in our schools. So was there, I guess, just curious if you could elaborate a little bit on, you know, the addition of 4 counselors. Was there discussion around social workers and, you know, either, I don't know if it would be 2 counselors and 2 social workers or some mix of that in this formula that you're proposing? Or why was it just focused on the counselor position?
Well, as you know, both positions are incredibly important, both the social worker who helps connect families and students to resources, and the counselor who also helps with the connection piece, but tends to work more directly with the student. And so just based on where we are, we felt like in the priority order, we needed the counselors right now, which is not to minimize the need for social workers, but simply to say within what we felt like might be obtainable, that was where we went, kind of like when we talked about the capital piece. I certainly see as we move forward year to year, if the need decreases, wouldn't that be wonderful? But if the need continues to increase, then continuing to grow our student support services as we go. And so it was really that piece to just determining where we felt like the greatest need was in this moment, which is not to minimize the opportunity that other positions bring to the table. I will say that having had the opportunity to be a part of the Teaming on Kids, and each school calls it a different meeting, where our counselors and social workers and administrators and school nurses all get together in one room and talk about students by name and their needs and what they've done so far and what's worked and what hasn't worked. That's been absolutely fabulous, and our school social workers have been a very important part of that conversation, particularly as they add to the conversation. So both positions are incredibly important. The 4 counselors were prioritized at this time based on it'd be ideal to say we'd like to add lots of counselors and social workers.
And just lastly, on the assistant superintendent, again, I think a very wise investment. I know that, you know, looking at the data that was presented by the county commissioners a couple months ago, you know, a big point of that discussion was around achievement gaps among students across the county. And, you know, a lot of these services, be it counselors, social workers, and being organized with the leadership of an assistant superintendent, as you've described here, I think is going to really, really support the initiatives across our schools in closing that achievement gap.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to say thank you for your attention to that concern as well in the county, and because it's real, you know, and we do need to work to improve it. The question I have was around the current student services department, you know, in our central office. Will that fall underneath this new superintendent, or will it stay with the current superintendent of curriculum and instruction?
So I certainly see, and that's a conversation that I've had with Dr. Reed, the student support services would report to this Assistant Superintendent of Educational Equity and Support Services. And as you mentioned, as we think about achievement gaps and even going so far as to say disproportionality in our discipline data, all of us have to work very closely together. And so this position will work very closely with the entire team, particularly Dr. Reed in our curriculum instruction area, so that we're really bringing wraparound services to each student individually to determine Is this a attendance area or a issue? Is this an issue of support needed outside of the school? What's the issue, and how do we best address that in a way that every student has the opportunity to be successful and graduate on time, prepared for what comes next? And so the Student Support Services department that currently exists would be a part of this. Ideally, and it will be my expectation that we are not creating silos, that we work hand in hand across departments. We are not going to be overly concerned with whose lane is what lane, because all the children are in all of our lanes, and so we're going to make sure that we do work very closely. However, having someone who is laser focused on educational equity when we're having conversations about achievement gaps or disproportionality and discipline data, I think is very important.
Thank you. I had one last thing I've been looking for this in all of this, and that was around bus drivers, and how we are having a really tough time with keeping bus drivers, hiring bus drivers. I assume, this Assistant Director of Transportation, and there's probably, I assume also the classified staff, implementation of phase 2 and 3 is going to apply.
Also in there, which may or may not, we'll see, there is a special section for bus drivers that's built in right now.
In the House budget. It's another $2 raise.
So if it passes, that comes into play as well, besides the phase 2 and 3.
Yeah, but I didn't know if you could add some color around how does this budget help us close the gap on the bus drivers that we need?
Absolutely. So, and you really hit the nail on the head with the salary and benefits increase, which would certainly apply to our bus drivers, and this additional funding stream for bus drivers through the House would be absolutely fabulous. The Smart Bus solution is also going to be a piece of that, in that we're going to be able to efficiently, or even more efficiently, route our buses to determine how many bus drivers we actually need, so that we can get our students, so they don't have long bus rides, but we're using as many buses as needed, but not more than that, whatever that number might be. We have spent time with all of our employee groups, and will continue to make sure that we're understanding their working conditions. And so you mentioned teacher working conditions survey, and that'll be a part of what I talk about this evening. But ensuring that everyone who works in the school system has ideal working conditions, very important. And so ensuring we're doing a good job with our bus drivers is a piece of that. And so I believe that specifically intentionally addressing working conditions for bus drivers, increasing salary and benefits, and then being as open-minded with recruiting as we possibly can is important. As you know very well, our community, our greater community, suffered a devastating blow when the mill closed. I have been able to sign some employment documents for some former mill employees. We hate that they're no longer at the mill because the mill's not there, but as soon as that happened, our Human Resources Department reached out to that community to be able to say, if you're looking for work, we have some opportunities, and we've been able to do that. And so I raise that as an example of, we've charged our Human Resources Department for looking in non-traditional places for folks who could do a great job for us driving buses and other employment opportunities in the school system.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Others? Hearing none? Are we finished, Ms. Thorpe?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for your information and knowledge and work. Thank you all. And I think I'll recognize Dr. Reed. She's not aspiring anymore.
I'm so glad about that. Good afternoon, everyone. I will be talking to you this afternoon about ESSER funding. This is the bucket of funds, actually multiple buckets of funds that have increased that percentage of our total funding in that federal category. Specifically, I'll be talking about two ESSER funding sources. One is PRC 171, which you can see on the top row. And then one is PRC 181, which you see on the next row down. We refer to both of these buckets more informally as ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. And if you will take a look first at PRC 171 or ESSER 2, if you follow along to the last column, you'll see that that total allotment was a little over $22 million. And then we received the allotment for ESSER 3 or PRC 181, and that total was almost $50 million for a grand total of a little over $72 million, which I believe Ms. Swanger always says was the largest sum of money that our school system has ever seen at one time. The purpose of our funds really goes back directly to COVID-19 and its COVID-19 relief and recovery. And it's very important anytime we think about ESSER that it has to be in response to COVID, specifically in the following three areas. The first being academic and social emotional learning loss. The second being to prepare our schools for reopening and, heaven forbid, another potential long-term closure, but we are ready if that were to ever happen. And then the third being testing, repairing, and upgrading projects to improve air quality in our school buildings. Thank you, Clark, Wyatt, and team. We've done a lot of work in that area. And we've stuck with the motto from the beginning that we knew these were temporary funds. But we wanted to ensure that these funds had a lasting impact on our system. And we're definitely at a point now to say that we feel like we've had a lot of success with that impact, and we're laser focused on how we can sustain that impact as long-term as possible. This short timeline actually is just a recap of this current 22-23 school year. I'll hit the highlights there for you. I think one of those is that we have a steering committee that's been together since the beginning of receiving this large funding source. Madam Chair Ann Franklin has been serving on that since the beginning, and we've welcomed Ms. Judy Lewis this year to serving on that as another board rep. We also have principals, teachers, students, and some other community organization representatives on that team. And we've kept that team pretty much the same people fully intact the entire time. So the historical knowledge of that team of folks has been really beneficial. That steering committee has met to date 3 times, and our next meeting, it says May 9th on there, but it's actually May 15th, so it's just around the corner. A couple other highlights on that timeline is that October, November, we actually had a monitoring visit, a federal monitoring visit. So we spent a lot of our work this last fall preparing for that monitoring visit. The focus of that visit was really 2 questions. The first question being, did we do what we said we were going to do with the funding? And then what was the impact? And so we had to share answers to those 2 questions, not only for these 2 buckets of funding, but every COVID relief dollar that we received outside of these 2 PRCs. And I'm proud to say that we passed that federal monitoring visit with flying colors. And that is thanks to a lot of people in this room who were also in charge of some of our subcommittees. So not only do we have the steering committee, but the subcommittees that you see listed at the bottom of this slide were in charge of gathering an even larger group of stakeholders to have meetings in between our steering committee meetings to drive the work in the expenses under the ESSER budget. I will not be going down this entire list, but this is the list of all of the FTEs or full-time positions that were in that first column in our original application. And you can see at the very bottom of that table in the original application were 71.5 full-time positions or FTEs. If you follow that chart to the right, column by column, you'll see that by the third column, which is actually the present, May 1st, 2023, that went down to 63.5 positions. And then actually now, the positions actually filled there are 55.5, and that's very intentional. We know that we have to start heavy with our spending, and that by the end of this grant, we want to kind of wean ourselves off of that amount of funding because we know that it will be gone after September of 2024. Some of the reasons behind that lowering number of positions are that there were some very hard to fill positions. and that were just never filled and were actually taken out of the grant. We also know that there was some attrition, and when there was attrition in certain areas, we may or may not have filled that position, potentially due to need or because maybe it was a hard-to-fill position. And we also have notified all of our folks in these positions that if they want to seek full-time employment elsewhere, they certainly were encouraged to do so, so they don't come back next May at this time and not have a full-time position. This is a breakdown of funding by year and by subcommittee. So I shared those subcommittees a few slides previous. And this was just Buncombe County Schools' way to kind of break this down into some doable categories that met the needs of our district. And so, for instance, you'll see summer learning. It's the second one down. And we were very intentional about providing a very robust summer learning opportunity so we could help our students recover from that academic and the social emotional learning loss. So we put our funding in summer learning heavily at first, and then we slowly pulled back on that funding. We'll still have a very robust summer learning program this year, but this will be the last year that we have that. So we intentionally spent heavy, and then we kind of eased back on that spending in the majority, if not all, of these categories. One great example of sustainability is the Buncombe County Virtual Academy. We poured into that because it was new and it was a newly formed school at the beginning. And now that it is a school, it is more self-sustaining in its operational costs. Some of the highlights of our spending of these ESSER funds, one I'm certainly most proud about is our curriculum and assessment purchases. We were able to equitably resource all of our schools with ELA curriculum. We are looking at purchasing a math curriculum. Our special services department was able to acquire curriculum, and we also were able to acquire curriculum for our English learner department. In addition to that, you'll see some of the highlights. We provided an interventionist at all of our middle schools, which has been amazing to support students in their learning recovery. We've been able to fund behavior specialists, social emotional learning coaches, and then one of the biggest highlights that I would like to pull out is the bottom bullet there about managing ADM loss. It was a great thing to be able to tap into these ESSER funds to prop us up and keep us whole with our current staffing levels, even though our ADM was on a decline. And we have continued to pour ESSER funding into that to ensure that we keep our teachers whole and that we're only losing teaching positions through attrition. Again, I'm just going to end with the fact that our focus now is that these are temporary funds and we intend to do everything we can to sustain the impact of that funding. You have any questions?
I have a question. Dr. Reed, can you explain to me what I know it's social emotional learning, but the coach piece, what exactly are they doing?
Absolutely. So our SEL coaches are supporting our teachers as they support student needs. So our SEL coaches can provide a lot of different services to schools. They can collaborate with administrators. They can provide professional development to entire, schools or groups of teachers. And then they can provide one-on-one coaching support with teachers as they learn classroom management. I will say with the high number of new teachers that we have, it's been very valuable. It's also been valuable in addressing some of the more intense student behavior needs that we've seen.
Okay. And I actually subbed in a credit recovery position. So was that a new position with ESSER funds?
It was. I think maybe one of our high schools had a similar position prior to ESSER, but again, it was an equitable response in providing that credit recovery position across schools because we know there was, of course, learning loss because our students need the courses to graduate from high school.
So with it being ESSER funds, those funds run out next year?
That is correct.
Yeah, I think that's a critical job.
Very important job.
Definitely.
And we do provide some other credit recovery resources too, outside of those positions.
Thank you.
Just a question that you mentioned the positions that were really difficult to hire for. And it looks like on the data that it's mental health therapists and psychologists.
that's true.
Do you mind just giving a little color around like what is the dynamic there that makes those positions so difficult to hire for? Is it competitive salary? Is there something that's driving those positions specifically that we're being?
So I don't think it's competitive salary. I think it's just our people aren't graduating from those programs from universities, and they're just not in this area to fill, but others may have more information than I do.
I would just say that's been universal in my experience and in my conversation with superintendents across the state. It's a lack of folks to hire. And so there's just, it's a position that COVID really illustrated the importance of. And so we spun up, and in fact, in the last year, the state allocated dollars for school psychologists in a new way because of the recognition of the need for that particular position. And so it's really, what we've experienced is we're not interviewing folks who say you don't pay enough. We can't find folks to interview. And so I do know in talking with at the university level that they are encouraging students to consider that career path and trying to up those numbers in terms of how many folks decide to go into that work. But overall, it seems more to be a lack of those to interview as opposed to not having the right salary and benefits.
And so those would be a licensed mental health therapist or a licensed clinical social worker? Like one of the two degrees, I guess, would be required for that type of role?
For the mental health therapist role?
Yeah.
Yes, they would have to be licensed to be a mental health therapist. And Tina, you may be able to weigh in at the initial conversations. We were looking at being able to support our own mental health therapist program, right, from the county level. But for a variety of reasons, that was very challenging for us to be able to do.
Thanks.
All right, others? All right, Dr. Jackson, you want a minute or two?
Well, I'll
Not
take.
to shy away from it.
I enjoy a good microphone, Madam Chair. Now, I will simply say that I again want to highlight and compliment the work of our staff. It takes a lot of work to do all the background work, just thinking about the capital, the amount of time that was spent when a principal said, we need this thing, and someone had to go find the cost of that and then put it together, and then to have schedules that span years and decades in some cases to make sure that we are appropriately planning. I appreciate the level of professionalism. When principals come into the room and they have some items on the list, but they say, well, maybe my item isn't as important as somebody else's item, that to me tells me that our heart's in the right place and we're trying to do things the right way. The decisions before our board are not easy, and so I appreciate each of you stepping forward and having the courage to say, here I am. It's not an easy decision before you, certainly won't be an easy decision before our county commissioners, but I appreciate that you're here, and I appreciate all the time you've put into trying to understand what is arguably one of the most complex school funding formulas in the entire country, and that's something that's talked about quite often when referring to North Carolina's funding mechanism in the state. And so thank you for the work that you're doing, board members. Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Sure. I just, as a board and as a person, I truly respect and appreciate the work that you do. And so many times it's not noticed. But believe you me, our eyes are open and we're on you and we support what you do and are very thankful that you're here to work with us. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Could I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I believe we're